Here we are, the PPL podcast. I am your host, Jamieson. I'm here with the best producer in the planet. We've got Mike. Mike, what's going on, buddy?
It's going well, Davis. How are you doing, buddy?
It's good. It's just the two of us today. It's just this is gonna be fun.
We'll sing it. Just the two of us.
Just the two. Name the artist.
We can make it if we try. I don't know. Who is that artist?
Oh my God, I guess I should know the answer if I put you
Okay,
on the
you
spot.
can, don't you know you never ask a question if you don't know the
I
answer.
thought I did. I can picture the guy. It's going to come to me as we go through this podcast. Our
Okay.
listeners know already, and they're embarrassed for me.
Well, while you're talking later, I'll Google it and get the answer for
Sounds
us.
good.
So,
Sounds good.
who sings Just the Two of Us? Good to see you, man. We talk a lot about you, Davis, as the host of the most, the host of the PPL podcast. But let's remind the listeners that you are also the general manager of the Miami team.
Yeah, the Miami Paddle Club. The Miami Paddle Club are a team to be reckoned with, and I haven't talked a lot about the team or the players, and we've talked about some signings, but I guess because of my role with the podcast, my role with the team, I've tried to be a little bit standoffish with talking about it, but I think it's exciting to talk about because Miami, I'm happy to say, is doing a lot, not only for their own team, but they're doing a lot for the league, right? So we can get into that.
Well, we're going to get into it, but I want to talk about this nickname. So you
Yeah,
guys
yeah.
have chosen so is it Miami PC?
Yeah, Miami PC is sort of what we want people to be saying. So this was like, so we when we got together as a group, you have names. You have the marketing team we worked with, Pulse. They came up with names, and there were a lot of cool names. Like animals and nicknames and things like that. And we couldn't really come to a decision that we really felt comfortable with. And we knew that by going with Miami PC, it gave us some wiggle room. That wiggle room of like, well, maybe next year something happens next season where we do want to change our name and we haven't gone with the Miami Frogs and you have to change it to, so with Miami PC, and it felt cool, right? European soccer, European football has that feeling. I live in Toronto, we got the Toronto FC, right? So that was where that came from.
And it's worth noting that one of the greatest members of Toronto FC is an owner of the Toronto franchise, the Polar Bears.
Yeah. Can you say his name?
Sebastian Giovinco.
Oh, you say it so well. I'm so happy you brought him up. We're gonna get him on this podcast, by the way. It's just a matter of time. He's already agreed to come on, so it's just a matter of time till we get him on.
Well, let me go on the record because I know Sebastian is listening right now.
He listens
I
to all of
am
them.
of the belief that Toronto FC, it's a no-brainer to re-sign Sebastian. He's got a lot of gas left in the tank, and he'd be a welcome addition. And the fans would love it if he were a member of
I,
TFC again.
I think that he's a fan favorite. I don't think. I know that he's a fan favorite, and anyone that's a favorite of the city, he loves the city, and people, Torontonians take that on, right? If you show that you love the city, then they're going to be all over that. Question for you, Mike, because
Yes, David.
you've been producing this podcast. What's your level of like, so in the Padel world, you didn't know anything about Padel before this, right?
I had to Google Padel when I learned about the PPL, and I ended up on the Wikipedia page getting a 101. Like, I've been learning so much so quickly. In fact, could I like hijack this and take this opportunity?
Take it.
Just okay. So let's like set the table here because I'm going to ask
Yeah.
you for some more intel on the
Yeah.
Miami Padel Club. But just to kind of recap where we're at with this inaugural season of
Yeah.
the PPL,
Yeah.
we talked about this. In fact, the night before the draft, I got to have a long chat with the aforementioned Sebastian Giovinco. But we've had the inaugural PPL draft that was held in Toronto, and that has taken place.
That's done.
That's done. Subsequent to that, now players are being signed. So the franchises are signing up players and maybe signing, I don't know, free agents and
Yeah.
basically assembling their roster.
Yeah. So let me speak to that. So right after the draft, there was about a 3-4 week window where you could sign your drafted players. In that draft, we had the ability to draft 8 North American players, right? So we now have, or we did, because April 3rd was essentially the date in which we had to have all of our North American drafted players signed, right? So there's a window still of I believe May 6th where we can sign internationals and anyone not from the draft. But the general managers and the presidents had a lot of work to do right after that draft to meet with the player, talk to the player, talk about their role on the team, um, what the match schedule is going to be like. And there's a lot of tough decisions and conversations that you're having because only two men and two women can play in a match, right? So you have a men's match and you have a women's match. And then if you tie those, so one win and one win, then you go into a rubber match that's mixed. But it's very likely just the same people that played the other two.
Right. On that note, Davis, when do we see some PPL action? Like, when do these
Yeah.
players hit the court for real?
The majority, so teams are treating it differently. I think the bulk of the teams are going to be flying in and coming in on around between the 9th and 10th and the 11th of May to get their teams there to do a little bit of training. No one will know each other, with the exception maybe of a few players that have been drafted that do know it. The USPA, which has all the US born players, they will know each other. They play in a tournament biweekly. So they'll be familiar. It's the internationals coming in that they'll know nobody. So we'll get them in around that time, start training. Teams are going to be figuring out who's being paired with who, to set up the very first match for most teams, which is May the 13th.
That's exactly 1 month from today as we record.
Yeah, that's scary.
Okay, so I need to get the lowdown on the lay of the land in Miami.
Yeah.
I do follow, the social media accounts for the PPL, so I know you guys have signed Marta Marrero, and I have a lot of questions about this. But just before we dive deep into the Miami Padel Club, which you're the GM for, can you name? I feel like we haven't actually done this yet in the podcast. Can you name all the franchises in this inaugural season of the PPL? Name all the franchises.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure to do that. Let's start with the number one franchise, the Miami Padel Club.
Woo!
Let's go into everyone else is now secondary, but we'll all mention them. The Las Vegas Smash. We got the Los Angeles Beat. We've got the Arkansas Matrix.
Right.
We've got the Toronto Polar Bears. We got the Cancun Wave. And we got the San Diego Stingrays. That makes up the PPL. That's pretty good, right?
Those are great nicknames. Yours could use a little creativity, but I actually dig what you're trying to do there. Like,
I think that I could be wrong, but I think there was probably only one or two team names prior to us coming to the decision of the Miami Paddle Club. And I will admit now, in seeing and hearing the other teams, we've definitely gone the other direction, right? But with the idea that who knows, maybe next fall we have a huge social media thing out there with our fans in Miami helping us choose a name, right? There's a lot of options there.
Davis, this is why you wear the not only the GM hat but the marketing hat.
I wear some hats. I'm not a big hat guy, but I wear those hats.
So so now we have the nicknames and the cities.
Yeah.
But have you seen the logos for these teams? Like, are there? So
yes,
I haven't seen logos. So I have a couple of questions. Firstly, how are these logos looking? And when, like, I'm just speaking as the producer of this fine podcast, but I love to wear t-shirts. Okay. I'm wearing one right now, but I can't imagine, like, it'd be amazing if every time we recorded, I threw on size medium, everybody. I throw on, not like Davis, who's size large. I throw on a t-shirt for a different franchise in the PPL. Tell me about the logos. Are they?
Yeah. They're all really cool. They're all unique in their own way. I think the very first logo that we saw as a league was the Toronto Polar Bears, and I thought it was cool. Like what the logos are going to match, I think, the personality of the team, and I think like even with the Miami PC, I'm not sure we were ready to be any kind of animal yet. I think that it was still in that development stage of figuring out who we were. Whereas I think the other teams, I spoke to the San Diego owners, the Stingrays, although they had other options, it felt good. It felt right.
Right.
Cancun, we talked last week, and they gave the explanation of Wave, and we thought that was really cool. Arkansas Matrix is the company name, right, of the courts. So
right.
That was marketing and also from a business standpoint, but it sounds cool.
Yeah, it's got the accent in it. I think it's very cool. But I think you played it wise here. Is that your inaugural season? You're going to be Miami PC.
Yeah.
Then you'll get the fans engaged in some kind of a
Yes.
contest and give yourselves a
Yes.
nickname for season two. Smart,
I
smart.
like that. It was partly my idea, but it was also based on just us in a room not being able to come to a decision of what, right? Like, whereas everyone else sounded like they were like, yes, it's wave, it's
Right.
stingray, it's polar bears.
Love it, Davis. Now you're the GM of Miami now, so put on that hat. We talked about all
Yeah,
the hats you wear.
yeah,
For me, who's new to Padel, please
yeah.
educate me. Who is Marta Marrero?
So Marta Marrero is, so let's put it into context too. So this is the Pro Paddle League. It's a North American league. Padel is not a North American sport, yes, yet. It's a European sport. It's a Mexican sport. So um, the first thing that every GM president team did was start to research, okay, well, we can have two international players on our team. Who are these going to be? How good of a player can we get? Can we get the top players in the world? Are they going to be hard to find? Are they going to be too much to pay? Like, so all these questions were being asked by all the owners and then their team. And it was really, it was really about connecting and building relationships with the proper people outside of Canada and outside of even the US for me to connect with that person that connects me with that person. And then you build a relationship and there's trust. And then all of a sudden you have a name of an agent. And then that agent is willing to speak to you. And then you build a relationship with them. And then all of a sudden you have Marta Marrero. Marta Marrero is the I mean, this might be going too far to say, but I would put her as the Serena Williams of Padel.
Wow.
And the reason I do that is not because of Serena and Venus and how they came up through the system and their story. It's more about the longevity of being number one, and being dominant. Those two things are what make Marta Marrera special. And let's not forget, this is a top 40 tennis player too. Like, tennis is the number one international sport for women in the world. It's one of the few sports that actually make money for women. So it's very competitive. It's not like, no offense to hockey, there's not 10 nations playing it. There's every nation is playing it to some degree. So she's a top 40 tennis player that converted to padel. At what age, I'm not sure, but instantly started winning. She was number one in padel in the World Padel Tour for a number of years. I think it's 2014 to 19 or something ridiculous like that. And even in her retirement, this is a great stat. Even in her retirement, she's still maintained a top 10 ranking based on points received. So if you look at her, if you go to the women's rankings right now for padel in the world, she's in the top 10, but she's been retired for 8 months. So just to end off on the story is after speaking with the agent and then getting a chance to speak with her and building a relationship with her and building trust and explaining what the PPL is and what we have planned, I think it was in two parts a no-brainer for her. The first was, this is an interesting idea. It's not going to be as competitive as the World Padel Tour because you're not getting the best players in the world. And I'm retired. So I don't think I'm putting my body through the biggest test yet. Second, what a way to launch another part of her career as far as her brand, other than coming into Miami of all places. So I actually feel like it's less about my GM hat and how I convinced her to come. And it's more about, I think if every GM in the league called her, there would be, I mean, maybe LA, but I think it was about getting her brand in the city of Miami.
Well, I was going to ask, how did you land the Serena Williams of Padel? I mean, now that you've given me some context, Marta Marrero.
Work. First of all, she's great. She was easy to. I mean, her and her agent were, like literally a pleasure to talk to and to work with. And she was diligent and she wanted to cross every T and dot every I in regards to how it was going to work, how the matches were going to work, where she would live. And then, like, these are complicated things to do. So I think that what she wanted more than anything was, how was it all going to shape out? How was she going to spend her time there? I couldn't promise her who she was going to play with because that had to be figured out. So I actually think it was like a relationship that I built that then turned into comfort.
Sure.
So then, wow. And then there's a financial reward to it as well, right? So she's being paid to come, and she's being paid well to come and participate.
Wow. Are you getting text messages from the other GMs in the PPL cursing you out, calling you nasty names? Like, this is quite the coup for you.
They are, at the owners' dinner that you came to, I was like buddy buddy with everybody. I'd say my buddy buddy relation. Getting people on this podcast is going to get harder and harder with these signings that I have. No, in all honesty, I think that the first year here,
Yeah.
all I've had is positive, because this is building the league up. For each team to be successful, um, it's fine that Miami has success like this in year number one. It'll all build. Marta, this won't be the last Marta Marrero if this is a successful season. So it had to start somewhere.
Wow, it's amazing I got invited to the owners' dinner, considering the only thing I own is a bicycle.
Yeah, but it's a nice bike though, right? It's a beautiful bike.
Shout out to my Fuji feather. All right, so the feather in your cap we call Marta Marrero. Do you want to shout out some of the other acquisitions that the Miami Padel Club has
Yeah,
made as we head into the inaugural season?
we touched on it a few episodes ago, but our very first international signing came early in the process, and that was with a gentleman from Spain named Ruben Rivera. And Ruben, albeit not a former number one player in the world, very difficult to land someone like him, because this is a top 60 player in the world. Imagine being top 60 at anything in the world, let alone a sport like padel, and someone who's on a regular tour, participating week to week, trying to build points, earning money. So I would say he was as hard to land as Marta was, not because of the star power, but trying to get someone who could break free from what they were doing to participate in our league. And both him and Marta are likely not going to do the full schedule. We'll have them for 3 out of the 4 weeks, and then for finals, if we were to make it to the finals. But Ruben is, I mean, I talk about him as much as I talk about Marta, because I think that he's going to be a leader for the team. He potentially a little bit of a coach as well. And just an amazing human being. Not that Marta is not, but to have these two superstars on your team and to have such leadership roles, I mean, that's going to be the biggest factor, I think.
Amazing. Would you like to name check
Yeah.
others?
I think it's important to go through the North American draft,
Sure.
because these are players that grinded out in USPA events in the US. They travel to Vegas, and then they travel to LA, and then they travel to Houston, and they're all over the place. So we drafted 7th overall for the men and 6th overall for the women. Our strategy was pretty simple in theory. We signed, we knew we didn't have Marta signed, but we hoped we did. We had her in principle by that point, and we had Ruben signed. So we could go into the draft. We've mentioned on this podcast before how important it is for the side they play. Ruben and Marta both play the backhand side. So our strategy in the first round for both men and women was to find someone that played the other side. So we went with Jose, and I'm going to totally destroy the pronunciation of his last name, but it is what it is. But we went with Jose Asprey, and he is a former top number one top player in the U.S. So he had a number one ranking in the U.S. Had children, which I know I've done, and you can't be at your best every single. And then he took a bit of some time off, and now is back playing again. So has maybe a 5th or 6th ranking in the U.S., but he plays the appropriate side. So we went with him. I had many conversations with him prior to the draft. I told him in advance that if he was available, I'm taking him, and that's pretty exciting for him.
Woo.
And sure enough, he was available to me at the 7th overall pick. So to no surprise to him, we chose him. We then flipped right back. So we had the 7th and 8th pick because it's a snake draft.
Right.
So we went right away with another top player who I didn't think was going to be available to me, in Simon Chavez Jones. He's a Mexican-born player who plays in the Mexican circuit. So this is where we had Cancun on last week, and I was kind of picking their brain. This is where it becomes hard, Mike, to navigate. Like, who's better, the number 3rd player in the US or the 18th player in Mexico, because it could be the Mexican that's better, but they don't play against each other. So what we did as a strategy again is we picked the player that's going to play next to Ruben sidewise, and then we picked the next best possible player in Simon. We then went from that point on, we kind of know our starters. So now you're picking your roster based on availability, proximity to Tampa, where the matches are. So we went with Mateo Coles in the third round of the men's draft because he's a Miami-born player, a very good Miami-born player, a younger player, but a player that we think that, because we're not drafting him for only 1 year, we have their rights.
Right.
So this isn't so someone like Mateo, we may view him as not as strong as Jose in year one, but next year the hope is that he keeps getting better. So we're building something here, and we wanted Miami-born players because of the proximity to the event, but also because why not? We're Miami PC, like we're gonna go with some homegrown talent.
Yeah, the fans love it. I know whenever there's a Canadian on the Toronto Raptors, for example, like it's like, yeah, that's our guy. Yeah, fans love it when you have homegrown
They
talent.
love it, love it, love it. I think it's important to talk about the Toronto Polar Bears, even though we're talking about Miami. You know what they did that was so smart, and it was happening before my eyes in the draft.
Tell
Each
me.
draft pick they had, I was looking at who it was, and we were checking off. We had a staff of, oh, they went with this guy. By the fourth round, we're like, they haven't picked a single person not from Miami. They literally drafted 8 players that live in Miami so that they could easily get to and from Tampa. Because we're talking year one. Why blow your brains out with travel and all this? They went with the hotbed of Padel in the US, which is Miami,
Right.
and they strategically decided to draft everybody from there. And in the moment of them doing it, although I knew that they I don't think, I'll go out on record saying I don't think the Toronto Polar Bears win this season. The league. Do they win matches? Of course. Do they beat teams? Of course. Do they win the league? I don't think in year one they do, because I think that the 6 of the other 7 teams dipped into the international market.
Now, here, I'm a resident of Toronto, so I'm naturally rooting for the Polar Bears
Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah.
Perhaps this strategy, it's smarter than even that, because these players might be able to get together, play together, build chemistry well before
They
the
already are.
right. Whereas other teams, it's sort of like when you have your Olympic hockey team or whatever, and you take players from all these different teams, and you're now a team, and it's not quite that simple. But now Toronto's got a team that's been playing together
Yeah.
for weeks.
Yeah, they will have that advantage, and that's who Miami play in the first game. So May 13th is Toronto versus Miami, and I'll prepare our players to let them know that we may have a couple of stronger players than they do, but if they've been training for 2 weeks together and have that team sense, they're going to be tough.
Exactly. Now I'm so excited because you had these questions like, will is the 18th best player in Mexico better than the third best player in America, and all these things, and we're on the verge of getting some answers, right? Like this is all
Yes.
new and it's all happening soon. But on May 13th, if I
Yeah.
want to watch your Miami Padel Club take
Yeah.
on my
Yeah.
Toronto Polar Bears, how can I see this
So,
action?
so there's 3 ways to watch your team play, Mike, and I can't believe your team is Toronto, but I get it. I get it.
If they send
Um,
me a T-shirt, I'll wear it
yeah,
every
it's
game.
coming. It's coming. I promise. So Toronto versus so 3 avenues to watch. First, as mentioned before, and I think Keith Stein and Marcos mentioned this in, I'm going to say podcast 2 or 3. We have a deal with CBS. That deal won't show these games live. There'll be a tape delay that we don't know precisely when they're going to be aired, but there'll be that, and they'll advertise them, they'll market them, and that'll be out there. Where I think the majority of people will be watching this is the live streaming, and the live streaming will be right there in the moment. And what live streaming services they'll be available during that, we will find out, but there will be that option. And then third is if you hop on a flight to Tampa and you come watch.
Right.
So year one is awkward in that it's all on one site. So what's the viewership going to be? Whether the ticket sale is going to be in Tampa, I don't think anybody knows yet because that wasn't the goal this year. The goal this year was to get it out there, to get it played, and then in year two is when we're going to start to have Toronto come to Miami to play, and then Toronto's going to have to figure out a way to get a home game for them with a pop-up Padel court, right? So in year two will be a lot different. You can buy a ticket in your own city in year two. It's year one that we're asking any diehard fan is if you really want to see it live, you'll come to Tampa. And I guarantee you a lot more people are going to do that now than they maybe were before hearing some of these signings, whether it be Marta Marrero, because in Florida and in Miami and in Tampa, where Padel is popular, they know her. They like they know Serena Williams, whereas here we don't maybe know Marta Marrero yet, but the more we mention her name, they will. They will.
And let me tell the listeners, and if people are watching the video, the viewers, let me tell you that if you're looking for links where the live streams are happening, bookmark propadelleague.com. Like everything, that's sort of like your
Yeah.
centralized
Yeah.
database of all this info. So if you're looking for news and you want to learn more about these teams, and it's all there at propadelleague.com. So go there and you'll get your data there.
And all social media outlets that Instagram and Twitter, obviously too. I know that all the teams are really utilizing the social media to get things out there, and you're reposting this and reposting that. So all that information, league schedule, is all going to be on there as well. But the website is the most obvious. You'll see standings for the teams. You'll see stats about players. You'll get intros about players. So that's where you want to go for all that information for sure.
Amazing. So we've got the lay of the land in Miami. We talked a little about the Toronto Polar Bears strategy at the draft. What teams,
Yeah.
Davis, specifically other than Toronto? Well, it sounds like
Yeah.
you're not too worried about Toronto, to be honest. But
Well,
what teams are you worried about?
yeah, with each passing day, like when we started going with Ruben and Marta and thought we had them and landed them, I really felt at that point that it was like a one horse race. Not to feel conceited, but I thought, God, if you have a former number one player and a top 60 player, and everyone else is below that, but now who am I afraid of? I'd say that there isn't a weak team, and even including Toronto, because who they drafted are good. Um, I'll give you some interesting stats. There are 7 teams in the league. 6 out of the 7 teams currently have 8 players on their roster. San Diego has 12. So what's the strategy there? Well, we'd have to have them on again to ask them. But my feeling is flexibility. Flexibility of by looking at their roster and without knowing everybody by heart, I can say that they probably have one of the strongest rosters overall, pound for pound. They don't have a Marta and they don't have a Ruben, but they have people pretty close. And those people that are pretty close, they have more than one of them, right? So that's
Depth.
the depth that they have, not just because they have the 12 players, they've signed almost all their draft picks, and then they've gone above and beyond that to find other players. So I look at their team as a really tough out. The LA Beat are interesting in that they're going to be guests on at some point, but I know they're close to signing their 2 what they call stars. Like I think every team is looking to have 2, one male, one female star. So those names are not known yet. But as a roster, I'd say they drafted well. But that's where it becomes hard to navigate. Like when we match up against them, I don't know who their 2 top players are yet. So they're hard to look at as a big team until I see them. Cancun, they're going to be really tough. We talked to them last week. They're going to be really, really tough because they're drawing from Mexico and probably only Mexico. We don't know. I don't know the Mexican leagues, but they do. And they have drafted one top international woman, Ana Cortez, who plays in Spain in the World Padel Tour, and she's a top 50 player. So, like, I spoke to Marta about her, and Marta says, yeah, she's good. If you match her up with a good player, then it's a good match. So I think that there isn't a bad team. Arkansas I'd say is very strong. I thought they drafted extremely well. So there isn't a weak team, and every team seems to be going with their strongest North Americans and then finding two internationals to support them. And if everybody's doing that, then it's going to be a competitive match every single week.
Well, I'm telling you, I'm excited. So here I am, new to the sport. I love the idea of being on the ground floor for a new league. It's like you're watching the birth of a league, the draft, the signing. The first games are going to take place in exactly 1 month time on May 13th. I'm excited, Davis.
It's hard to believe that after all this work that we're that close, with all the work, and there's behind the scenes work of where the players eating and where they staying and flights, and it's mayhem right now. But like, I'm so looking forward to starting the season, getting to know the players, um, getting results, seeing what the hype is of the team. As we get closer and closer, it's going to be a tremendous feeling. And then once we're a couple weeks in, I feel like there's going to be momentum that's going to carry through right through to the end. And my vibe was about 4 months ago when I started this. I have this very uncertain feeling. Like, I'm going to put in my best effort here, but I have, there's some uncertainty here because it's new to me. It's a new sport to me. I don't have any uncertainty anymore. In fact, now it's opposite of uncertainty. I know it'll work. It's how well it'll work, and how big is it going to be? Because with each passing day, if my vibe gets like that and I'm on the inside, I feel like it's going to be like a volcano and it's going to overflow. And I'm pumped up about it, buddy. You can tell in my voice, right? I'm excited.
I only have one word to say
Yeah,
after listening to that. Are you ready, Davis?
I'm so ready. Vamos!
Vamos!
Let's end that here, buddy. There's nothing else to say. There's literally nothing else to say now other than the vamos. You know what I mean?
Like, subscribe, share with your friends, whether they be tennis fans who are new to the game of padel or padel fans. Share this with those you love, because there's nothing like being on the ground floor of a brand new professional. History is
History.
being made. Thanks, Davis. Can't wait to chat with you next week.
Love you, buddy. Talk to you soon.